So we'll have a word of prayer and give him the microphone. Dear Lord, thank you for this moment, asking that your spirit will continue to move in this place. Bless your speaker in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Shields. Good afternoon. Okay, that was okay. We'll try it again, though. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for coming back this afternoon. When I was a student, everybody hated classes after lunch. This is the class after lunch. So hang with me. I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. Okay. First of all, I want to acknowledge the fact that the conference structure for people of color is different on the West Coast than it is on the eastern part of the country, okay? It is. It is not my intent or desire to tell you that you should have what we have on the eastern side. That's not my desire. It's just to explain the structure that we have and how it has benefited African Americans on the eastern part of the country. Okay, so I wanted to jump in and say that. Now, let me say two other things. Okay, largely this afternoon we're going to talk about Adventist African American history. Okay, when I say African American, I'm including people of African descent who live in the United States, okay? You might have come from Caribbean, the Caribbean, okay? Like my first church was in the Caribbean, all right? So for me, it's very easy to include everybody in that one bucket. Okay. Sometimes though, my Caribbean friends say, Elder Edmond, you're not including us. So I'm saying in the beginning, when I say African American, that's what you are. You're of African descent and you live in America. Okay. So that's my context. So I need you to understand that. Okay. Here's the third thing. And this may be the most important thing I need you to understand. I believe with all my heart that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is God's remnant church. I believe that with all my heart, okay? My grandmother, if you know anything about Adventist history, you'll understand this. My grandmother joined this church after hearing Edson White on the Morning Star, thank you, in Vicksburg, Mississippi, okay? When I was growing up as a teenager, I had no non-Adventist relatives in my family on either side, okay? Nobody is more I call myself the king of the Adventists, okay? Nobody, now I'm not saying that braggadociously, that's my family. I didn't have anything to do with that, okay? But I'm saying that to provide a context. Nobody believes in this church more than I do. However, this church has an unfortunate history of racism. It does. I'm going to tell you some things that might disturb you. So I want to tell you on the front end. I can't tell the history of African American Adventism without telling you the ugly part, okay? So if you can't take the ugly part, it's okay, but you might want to get off the bus now, okay? All right? And I tell you that not as some angry old man. I believe in diversity. As the president of my conference, I hired the first Caucasian pastor, the first Caucasian school teachers, the first women pastors. I believe in diversity, all right? And I'll put a pin in it and I'll come back to that, Okay, so but I can't tell the truth without telling you the ugly part. Okay, all right. Everybody good with me? Okay, all right, okay. Now, the good news is we're way much further down the road to where we need to be than we used to be. But we're not all the way there yet. All right? Okay. All right. That's the intro. All right. Now, the second part of the intro is going to be very quick. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what my office does, because with the exception of Dr. Shields, zero of you know what the Office for Regional Conference Ministries does. Okay, so I'm going to give you some context. All right. Uh-oh. Oh, I went the wrong way. That's the end. Okay. Okay, Brother 8V man, I thought I hit the wrong one, because that's actually the last slide. Yeah, how we got started, that's the last slide. Okay, there you go. Okay, so I'm going to do this to go forward. I thought that's what he told me. That's what I did. Okay, all right. Okay. Okay, we'll keep playing with it. Okay, all right. Okay, let me go back one. No, that's not going back. Okay, all right. My office is the Office of Regional Conference Ministries. One of the things that we do is the first Sabbath of every month, we do. In fact, it's actually the program is actually going on now because we taped it. We do a program called First Sabbath. We creatively called it that because we usually do it on the first Sabbath. The first Sabbath this year, we were in General Conference. So it's actually running today. It's an online program where we interview the leaders and the newsmakers of our church. We've had the General Conference president, a North American division president, the General Conference treasurer. Today, as in right now, we taped some interviews with some of the leaders of our church, and we asked them about what they do and what they're doing at General Conference. And that's on the ORCM YouTube channel and the ORCM Facebook channel. Next month, it'll actually be on the second Sabbath, and we're interviewing it's about Adventist education, and we're interviewing the regional conference superintendents. So July and August, it's not on the first Sabbath, but in September, we have a special guest. It is supposed to be, and you're the only ones that know this, it is supposed to be the new president of Oakwood. And we're supposed to interview her the first Sabbath in September. All right? All right. Okay, boy, okay. I'm missing some slides here, but it's okay. The other thing I want to tell you that our office does is our office is responsible for coordinating all the things that regional conferences do together. And some of them you know. Like most of you have heard of Breath of Life, right? Okay, Breath of Life. All right, the speaker director is Elder Debelia Snell, probably the best preacher we have in the Adventist church. Okay? I know you think your pastor is the best preacher. Okay, all right. So the best preacher after your pastor, because you should have seen their faces. I knew what they were thinking. Okay, all right. Okay. So after Dr. Shields, the next best. So our office subsidizes Breath of Life at the rate of about $300,000 a year. The reason why that's important is, except for Elder Snell, everybody else, their salary is not tithe-based. People like Dr. Shields and myself, our salaries are tithe-based. Okay, we receive money from the tithe. Elder Snell has a staff, but they're not tithe-based. He has to raise the money which I would not want to do. Even if I could preach as well as Elder Snell, there's no way I would want people depending on my fundraising abilities for their livelihood. Okay? But last year they raised $1 million. Okay, yeah. And the division probably gives them another $400,000 or $500,000, and we give them $300,000. Okay. All right. Next month, and it will include, because I need to explain, even though California does not have regional conferences, it has regional churches. Okay. This is a regional church. Okay, so you all are connected to us through he's almost a doctor, Elder Virgil Childs. He's the vice president for regional, he's on our board. He is a voting member of the Regional President's Council, okay? So next month, our young people, including some young people from here, will gather in Orlando for United Youth Congress, okay? Our de facto black unific recorder, I think that's what the name of your union, Porter, we have the regional voice, okay? And that comes out every quarter, all right? So our office coordinates all the things that regional conferences do together. The things that they do together make them a de facto union. If there was a black union, it would be ORCM. That's, in essence, what ORCM is, all right? All right, now let's talk about regional conferences. And we're going to try to do that in three sections. One, we're going to tell you what they are. We're actually going to do it in 4 sections. We're going to tell you what they are. 2, we're going to tell you how we got them. And 3, we're going to tell you why we still need them. And then the last thing we're going to tell you are things that some people believe about them that aren't true. All right? So, what is a regional conference? In the United States, and only in the United States, there are 2 kinds of conferences. State conferences, all the churches in a state forming a conference. California is so big that it actually has 3 state conferences, okay? 4, okay? Northern, Central, Southern, Southeastern. It's so big, okay? That's only true in California. Everybody else has 1 state or 2 states, like Florida Conference, Texas Conference. Texas actually has 2. Okay, Texas Conference, then Texaco, which is Texas, part of Texas and New Mexico. New York Conference, Ohio Conference, Pennsylvania Conference, New Jersey, all the churches in a state. Largely, but not exclusively, especially now, those state conferences tend to be white administered, and the churches they're not nearly as white as they used to be, okay? But when I was growing up, they were all white, okay? That's not nearly as true today as it used to be, all right? Okay, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So there's state conferences, mostly white administered, okay? Although that's not completely true either. There are a few state conferences that have black leadership. Northern California, for example, has a black president, okay? Potomac Conference on the East Coast has a black president, okay? New Jersey has a Latino conference. The fastest growing segment in the United States by far are people of Spanish descent, by far, okay? Right now, the church is about 25 to 27% Latino, okay? To show you how different the demographics of the church are today than what they used to be. In the 80s, the North American division was 70% Caucasian. Today, it's about 33% Caucasian, okay? The church is approximately, it's not completely, but it's approximately 1/3 Caucasian, 1/3 African American, and a little less than 1/3 Latino. The Latino portion of the church is just blowing up. In the next 5 to 10 years, max, if the Lord doesn't come, the largest group in North America will be Latino. There's absolutely no question about it. Conversely, the world church is majority African American, not African American, African descent, okay? Half of all Seventh-day Adventists live in Africa, okay? So when you add the people who live in Africa to the people who descended from Africa, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the largest demographic in the church, the largest demographic group in the church by far, there's no other group that comes close, are people of African descent. Okay. That's why, in my opinion, what happened at General Conference was a transition to different leadership. For years and years and years, the Seventh-day Adventist Church at the top has been led by white North Americans. Okay, years and years and years. There are probably only 2 or 3 presidents, until this last one, there are probably only 2 or 3 presidents in the history of our church that were not white North Americans. You probably saw the last one of those with the former president. When he left, that's probably the last one for a long time. Because the Adventist church, which started in North America, and for a long time, the majority of members and the majority of tithe came from North America. Today, only 6% of the church is based in North America. Okay? All right. So what you saw in St. Louis was the first step. Well, you saw on the leadership level something that's been happening for a while, and that is what I call the de-North Americanization of the General Conference. Okay. So what happened this time was you got a president from South America. Almost certainly, when he leaves, the next one's going to be from Africa. Because by that time, the church will be even more African than it is now. Because not only is that's where the largest group is, but that's where the growth is. Okay? So the church is only going to become more African, and conversely, the church both in the United States and in Europe, the Caucasian side of the church is diminishing. It's getting smaller. Okay? And so both of those trends have been going on for a while. And in the United States and probably in Europe, it's happening for 2 reasons. One is our Caucasian brethren just have not been able to baptize as many people as. Now, some of that is economics. Okay? We have always had a harder time baptizing people as they moved up the economic ladder. Okay? Now, that's not true of the member. The membership when they become Adventists, it's not uncommon for them to move up the Lord blesses, they become faithful, become educated, they move up that way. But baptizing people who are not Adventists is harder the further up the economic ladder you have. Okay, so that's one reason why the Caucasian side of the church isn't growing. Okay, because that's the wealthiest segment in the United States. But here's the other side, and most people haven't thought about this yet. And this is a part of the church that I don't think we've come to grips with yet, and that is, in the United States, neither Caucasian people or black people are having as many children as they used to, okay? But white people started that a long time ago. Now black people are doing it. When I was growing up, everybody had 1 million. There were 4 of us. All my friends had 4 and 5 kids, okay? So I have 2 sisters and a brother. The 4 of us together don't have 4 children, okay? Okay? I have 2. My 2 have 1 between the 2 of them. Not 1 apiece, but 1 total, okay? Now, that has implications for the church that we're just starting to realize, okay? We have 10, 11, 12, I forget how many, universities. I'm not sure that there are enough children to populate all those schools, okay? Particularly not enough Caucasian children, okay? All right? Oakwood is different in that that's still where a lot of black people send their children, okay? So, but even Oakwood is affected by that because the same Caucasian schools who once wouldn't let you register now come after you, okay? Because there's simply not enough other children to go around, okay? And so it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a challenge these next 10 to 15 years. Are all those schools going to be able to make it? Because the cost of education is only going one way, okay? And what we've done over the years is spread that cost among the students. Well, what happens when you have fewer students? Okay, so what you're seeing in our church is it's a good thing. Our church is way more diverse than it used to be, but there's some challenges that come with that. All right? All right. That was a quick sociology discussion, and you're the first ones I've ever shared that information with. All right. Yes. Yes. The other group that's growing fast, not nearly as fast as our Latino, our Asian, the Asian group. They're roughly at about 9% of the church. Okay. Well, thank you for asking. And that's particularly, that would be, I think that's particularly true out here. Okay. At my hotel, I was thinking, man, this is an Asian Pacific hotel. I'm like, I'm the only non-Asian in the hotel today. Okay. But that's a group that's growing fast in our church too. All right. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. Okay. State conferences, all primarily, though not exclusively, Caucasian, membered and led regional conferences, all the churches in a region coming together. So regional conferences, with one exception, are multi-state conferences. The only state conference that's nominally a regional conference is Southeastern, which is primarily the state of Florida. Everybody else has a minimum of 4 to 5 states in their conference, and some have more than that. All right. So now we've defined what they are. Now we want to talk about why do we need two separate. That's what you've wondered. Why in the eastern part of the country, why do you have two separate organizations doing the same thing? When I was in South Central Conference, the regional conference and the state conference were headquartered in the same city, 10 miles apart. Okay. There was, if I'm remembering right, there was one city where you had a regional conference church and a state conference church on the same street. Okay. Why is that? Okay. And aren't regional conferences, which came second, an unnecessary duplication? All right? All right, so let's answer those questions. And we're going to do that. I'm going to do that by doing two things. First of all, we're going to talk about the first regional conference, and then I'm going to ask 6 of you to volunteer to come down here and help me answer that question. You don't have to say anything, but I need 6 people, all right? 6 people. I need you to come down front. 6 people. Thank you. Yeah, right now. Yeah, thank you. All right. Thank you, Dr. Williams. All right. I need 5 more. There you go. Thank you. That's 2. All right. I need 4. Yeah, so no, since you're coming, since you're moving, I need you to just keep on moving. There you go. Now I need 3. All right. I need 3. Yeah, no. And bring her with you. Bring her with you. There you go. Yeah, bring her with you. There you go. That's all right. She volunteered you, so that's what I'm saying. Okay, and here's number 6. Very good. All right, praise the Lord. Let's say amen for my volunteers. All right, now I'm a little biased toward Dr. Williams since I've known her since she was a teenager. Okay, so I'm gonna bring you out from among them. Okay. You are the Lake Region Conference. All right. Now, Lake Region, as you can see on the screen, it covers 5 states: Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. Got that? Okay. You are going to represent the state conferences, okay? So you're the Illinois Conference. You're Indiana. Your Michigan Conference, okay, your Wisconsin Conference, and your Minnesota, all right? Okay, now, remember, I said she covers the same territory that you cover, right? Okay, so she has a conference president. His name is Garth Gabriel, okay? But you have a conference president, 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 right? Okay? You have a conference office. It's in suburban Chicago. Really nice building, all right? But you have a conference office, 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 you have a conference office. You have a campground for camp meeting. But you have a campground, 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 all right? You have people who work in your conference office, like a youth director, like I was when you met me, okay? So you have a youth director, but you have a youth director, you have a youth director, you have one. In other words, you have in your office the same thing that all of them have in 5 conference offices. So now here's the question. Here's the other question. Which costs more to operate? Her or all of y'all? Her. She costs more to operate?
You mean all of us together?
Yes, together. No. All of you together. Right. Who's really duplicating services? Her or all of you? Yes. But what all of you say to her is, let's all come together. But when they say let's all come together, they don't mean they're coming to join her. They want her to close down and come to them, even though over the last 80 years, she's grown 4 times faster than they have.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Whose idea was it for these?
Yeah, we're going to break that down. Here we are. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, we need both. But when you don't know your own history, you swallow the Kool-Aid that says the primarily Caucasian entities are necessary, and she's the aberration. Okay? All right. Thank you very much. Okay. So, okay. All right. So now, to further prove the point that we made, in the geographical territory of the 9 regional conferences are 30 state conferences. It costs literally hundreds of millions of dollars more to operate the 30 than the 9, even though they cover the same territory. Okay. But the 30 consistently say to the 9, y'all need to shut down, and in the name of coming together, you need to be a part of us. But I'm going to suggest to you why that's not going to work. By saying, how did we get them? How did we get regional conferences? Now, here's how we get into, I want to tell you about 3 pivotal figures in African American history. All right? Here's the first one, Charles M. Kinney. Okay, Charles M. Kinney was the first African American to be ordained as a pastor. What does ordination mean? 15 years ago, the Adventist Church had this big, long discussion about ordaining pastors, female pastors, okay, which you're not supposed to do. Now, you guys on the Pacific Coast were the first ones to go rogue and do it anyway, okay? But, and I'm not going to get into that. But here's what I am going to explain, okay? Ordination is nothing more. I mean, it's important, but it's not a mystery. Ordination is the church publicly recognizing the call of God on a pastor's life. That's what ordination is. I was there when your pastor got ordained. Okay, the church is setting aside Joe Blow or John Smith and saying, we recognize you've been called by God. Okay? Now, with the exception of you all who've gone rogue, what the Adventist Church has said is, we will not ordain females. We won't do it. Okay. My question is, if ordination is simply recognizing the person's been called by God, why did you hire female pastor X unless you thought they were called by God? Okay. I used to be a conference president. I'm telling you, if I don't think you're called by God, I'm not hiring you. Why would you do that? Okay? So, the Adventist Church really has a conundrum. They really either need to do one of 2 things, either of which they are willing to do. Either you have to say, we will hire no female pastors. We're not going to do it. Or, once we hire them, we got to recognize that they've been called. Otherwise, why did we hire them in the first place? Why are we having uncalled people in the ministry? The one place where you don't want people who aren't called to be pastors is in the ministry. That's the one place you cannot be called to be a doctor. You cannot be called to be. I don't care, but I care if you're a pastor and you're not called to be a pastor. All right. So, but Charles Kinney was the first one for the church to recognize that he was called by pastor. And I'm going to tell you, if there's anybody who was ever called, it was him. You know why? Because he went literally years without receiving a salary. Because the Adventist church was not shy about treating African American and female workers differently than non-female, non-African Americans. There was for years a different salary scale for women workers. This is before they were pastors. I mean, if you had a job that was primarily staffed by females, then typically in the Adventist church for years you made less money. And it wasn't until they got sued, that the church got sued, that they fixed that. Okay? But I had one of my Caucasian friends that's a conference president. He called me up one day and he said, "You cannot say where you got this, but I'm sending you minutes of my conference 50 years ago where they voted, in essence, to balance their budget by reducing the salaries, not of everybody, but of African Americans." Okay, now y'all got to stay with me now. You all promised me you all can handle this, okay? All right, so Charles Kinney, and because it's about to get worse, Charles Kinney gets ordained in Nashville in the late 19th century. Okay, Nashville in the South, okay? There are hardly any black Adventists in those days. So he's getting ordained in a Caucasian setting. He brings his family to his ordination, and they want to be seated. But guess what happens? They don't want to seat his family with the other members who are not black. Okay? So Charles Kinney was one of the first ones to say, we're not leaving the church, but we might be better off with our own institutions. All right? Here's the next prominent figure in African American Adventist history. And he happens to be prominent even though, while he's African American, he's not Adventist. So how did he get to be prominent in African American Adventist history? I'm glad you asked that question. He was a journalist, okay? And in those days, this is the 30s and the 40s, in those days, if you were black, you could not write for the Los Angeles Times or the San Francisco Examiner, or whatever they call it, or you couldn't do that. In those days, we had black newspapers. When I was a little boy, we had black newspapers, okay? He basically did the black version of UPI, United Press International. That's where you get a bunch of stories and you send them out to different newspapers. That's what he did for black newspapers, okay? He had an Adventist friend, and his Adventist friend told him about how difficult it was to be in a church that was every bit as segregated as the rest of society. So, for example, if you were visiting the General Conference headquarters in those days and it was lunchtime, guess who was not eating in the General Conference cafeteria? Most of us, okay? All right. At Andrews, where I went to do my graduate studies, it was called Emmanuel Missionary College. You could eat in the cafeteria, but only at the colored table. Okay? So he wrote about that foolishness and embarrassed the church. Okay? But then came the straw that broke the camel's back. Lucy Byard. Okay? Lucy Byard lived in New York, she had a form of cancer that was fatal, wanted to be treated in an Adventist hospital. One of the things that this church does very well is health care. This church runs one of the largest non-for-profit health care systems in the country. And if you work for the church, the one place where you really want to work is the healthcare system because it's on a different pay scale than the rest of us, okay? Dr. Williams, if the healthcare system called me right now, the meeting would be over. I would be going to work for the healthcare system because and the reason why they pay better is they have way more revenue than everybody else. I mean, let me give you an example. The just one branch of the healthcare system is called Advent Health. That doesn't include Loma Linda. Loma Linda is a separate branch. Advent Health is mostly Florida, okay? Last year, the revenue from Advent Health was $20 billion, not million, $20 billion. To put that in perspective, if you added up all the tithe from all the churches in the Adventist church, it's a little under $3 billion. So one branch of the healthcare system is 6 times larger in revenue than the whole Adventist church. Okay? All right. So that's why they can pay better, because they have way more money. I served on the Advent Healthcare board, and we had to do a salary audit, because that's what boards have to do. And and part of the salary audit is they have to show you what everybody makes. Okay? And so I'm sitting on the board seeing numbers that I've never seen in Adventism before. Because those brothers, and I can share it with you because they have to post it because they're non-for-profit. Those brothers were making the people at the top were making 7-figure salaries and 7-figure bonuses. 7 figures. So I'm sitting around with all my Adventist administrator. I said, I was pointing at the CEO. I said, he makes what 20 of us make. Okay. So that's why I said, if they call me, I'm out of here. All right. All right. I'm going to unretire. Yes. All right. But it's something we should be proud of. We do health care very well and have done it well for years. Okay? So she wanted to be treated in an Adventist hospital. But because the Adventist church was very segregated then. This is 1943. That Adventist hospital, hold on to your seatbelts, that Adventist hospital's policy was, we do not treat black people. We don't treat black people. And if we make an exception, which they occasionally did, we treat them in the basement. But they cannot have ordinary rooms like everybody else. Can't do it, okay? Lucy Byard, whose picture, that's a copy of the only picture that we really have of her. And it does not show really how fair-skinned she was. She was very light. So they admitted her because they thought she was white. Okay. You know what they did when they found out she wasn't white? Kicked her out of the hospital. She's dying now. Kicked her out of the hospital, sent her across town to the black hospital. It wasn't Adventist then, but it was called Washington Freedmen's Hospital. Today, it's Howard University Hospital, which today is an Adventist hospital. That's part of our system, okay? Caused an uproar, which you can imagine. I mean, that's awful. Okay, caused an uproar. It caused an uproar because God knows what he's doing. Caused an uproar in the one place where in those days that had more than a normal amount of educated black people for that day. So, for example, Eva B. Dykes, if you know anything about Oakwood, Eva B. Dykes, the library at Oakwood is named after her. She was the first African-American female, not first African-American Adventist, first African-American, period, female, who finished the requirements for the PhD. She went to that church. And several other people went to that church, and they did what Adventists do. They formed a committee, because that's what we do, and that committee was called the Worldwide Committee for the Advancement of, I might be messing this up, the Committee for the Worldwide Advancement of Colored Seventh-day Adventists, the Adventist version of the NAACP. And they petitioned the conference, a general conference, and they said, listen, enough discrimination in employment. Do you know it took this church 100 years to have the first African American general conference vice president? Took 100 years for that to happen, okay? So they said enough discrimination in employment, enough in education. What they basically said is, you all will not build us schools of our own except for Oakwood, which, by the way, was segregated. Now, get this. The one institution black people had, and they couldn't get rid of segregation in their own institutions because they had white faculty members, okay? And in church, the white faculty members sat on one side of the building, and everybody else sat on the other side. At communion, you could not wash each other's feet. That was at Oakwood, okay? That's how thoroughly segregated the Adventist church was. And it took a strike in 1931 by the students to force the church to get a black administrator at Oakwood. Okay, all right. So the uproar because of what happened to Lucy Byard and the committee who met with the General Conference president, as a result of that, the General Conference voted in 1944 to allow what they called colored conferences, because those of you who are old like me remember when we were colored, okay? If you call somebody black in those days, those were fighting words. All right, so we were colored in those days. And then this is what the voted action literally said. Colored conferences to be administered by colored pastors and colored laymen. You know why that was important, why they had to say that? Because up until that time, black people couldn't run hardly anything in the Adventist church, okay? Even in Africa, I mean, back up until the days when I was a young pastor, I remember this happening at the beginning of my ministry. We were still sending white North Americans and white Europeans to run the work in Africa, okay? It wasn't until they stopped doing that the work exploded, because it's always easier to work for people of whom you share a common culture, okay? Okay, I'm gonna come to you. And now that doesn't mean that that's the only people you should work for, but it's easy, that's where you start. And I'll give you an example. We had a summit, we actually had 2 summit meetings. The first summit was the first African and African American Leaders Summit in Nairobi, Kenya. We did that 7 years ago because we thought it was important to connect with people whom we share a common culture. But then we said, okay, we have a lot of people of Caribbean descent. So we need to also meet with the Inter-American Division, which we did. We did that 2 years ago. Out of that came a joint evangelistic initiative where a number of us, including me, went to the North Inter-American Division to do evangelism. The first place I was asked to go to was Honduras. I said no. The reason why I said no was I don't speak Spanish, okay? So it's always easier. Now, I could have got my sermon translated, but if you've ever preached a sermon where you had to get your sermon translated, you have to do one of 2 things. You have to cut your sermon in half, or you have to hold people forever, because the people who are there are actually getting 2 sermons, okay? So anytime I preach, when I'm getting my sermon translated, I always have to cut it in half, okay? One time, I preached a sermon that got translated into 2 languages. So I had to cut my sermon into thirds because I had a translator. Then I'd say, thus saith the Lord. And then one brother would say, blah, 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 blah. And then the next brother would go, blah, 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 blah. And then we come back to me, Okay, had to cut it in thirds. But the translators, them brothers were preaching, so I had a good time. Okay, but but what that meant was I was gonna have to redo my whole series. I didn't have time for that, so I said I can't go. So I ended up going to Trinidad. All right, it's always easier to work for somebody of whom you share your culture. Now, because of gentrification, we're about to be in a situation where you all know what gentrification is. Okay, all right. What's happening in most of our major cities, if not all of them, our Caucasian brethren have moved back into the inner cities and bought up property, fixed them up, and good for them. But somebody has to reach them. They're our neighbors. We're going to have to reach them. That's going to call for a whole different kind of ministry than we've ever done before. All right? But our first responsibility are African Americans. Because if we don't reach them, then who's going to do that? All right? So that's what regional conferences do. Their first responsibility is to reach people of color. And the Lord has blessed us to do that at a rate where the regional conferences have grown 4 times faster than the rest of the church in North America. Okay, so Lucy Byer was the last. So that's by the way, that's the committee that they formed, which interestingly enough had no pastors. And the reason why I didn't have any pastors was to protect the pastors. Okay, because what they were proposing, regional conferences, was not always popular. All right. Okay. Now, so we talked to you about what they are, how we got them. Now we're going to talk about why we still need them. Elder Edmond, you're talking about something that happened 80 years ago. Why do we still need them? Okay. I'm going to give you 8 reasons. Here's the first reason. Reason number 1, regional conferences allow people of color to control their own resources. Okay? That's huge, especially if you compare regional conferences with what happens out here. Okay? The work here is funded by entities like the union and the conferences giving money to people like appropriating money to people like Elder Childs. That's fine. Good for, but you are dependent on what somebody else gives you. They decide what you get. Okay? It's kind of like getting an allowance. You remember back in the old days, if you're old like me, your parents gave you didn't negotiate that. They just said, here's what, my first allowance was 25 cents a week. Okay? That's what my father gave me. All right? I was happy to get it, okay? But it's always harder when somebody else controls your economic lifeline, okay? Did y'all hear what I said? It's harder when somebody has their foot, no matter how benevolent they are, somebody else decides what you get, okay? Regional conferences allow people of color to control their own resources. Okay, so let me give you 2 examples of that. One is our office building. You see that picture? It's on your left. That's the lobby of our office building. It's a 32,000, 2-story, $9 million building. Okay? When we moved in, hear me out. When we moved into that building 2 years ago, you know how much of that $9 million that we owed? 0. Did y'all hear what I said? We owe nothing. The reason why we owe nothing is the regional conference appropriated the money to buy the building. Okay? Nobody was going to give us $9 million. We would have had to borrow it. You know how much money it costs to borrow $9 million? Probably another 20 to 25 million over 30 years. So you know what that means? it means that's 20 to 25 million dollars that are going to go into some area of ministry instead of somebody's bank, because regional conferences control their own resources. Let the church say amen. All right. Okay. All right. Now, here's the second example. There would be no regional conference retirement plan without regional conferences. Okay? Now, I'm getting ready to retire. When I retire, because South Central, and only South Central, has had a supplemental retirement plan, so I'm going to get money from 3 sources: Social Security, Regional Conference Retirement Plan, and South Central. The 3 of those together are larger than my base salary now. Somebody ought to say amen, besides Mrs. Edmond. All right, okay. But that's because regional conferences control their own resources. And here's the other thing. Do you know how much money I have to put in to the regional conference retirement plan every month? Nothing. The conferences fund that for their employees. Okay? So, which, by the way, affects, you know how that affects you all? It's harder to get people to leave regional conferences to come here if they're older. Okay? Because they're concerned about their retirement. Okay? Now, the younger ones don't care because they don't think they're ever going to get old. Okay? And that's the reason why my office has proposed, because we're all in this together. You know, that's why the West Coast administrators are on my board, because we're all in this together. There are more black people in California than there are in Mississippi. Okay? We all in this together. So we propose, this is what we propose. Now, it hasn't gone very far, but we said, okay, what if we said to the regional conference leaderships, I don't want to use your pastor because you all shoot me. So we'll say, if Joe Blow pastor leaves a regional conference and commits to being out here for a minimum of 5 years, we will guarantee him a position back in a regional conference if he wants it. Okay. Now, the reason why we say that's a win-win for both of us. One is your pastor, the church, if I'm going to be honest, even though it was my conference, the church situation that he has now is better than the church situation that he left. He has more resources, nicer building, blah, blah, blah. So sometimes for the growth of the pastor, it would be better to give him an opportunity, like your pastor has had, since he left, more opportunities for his own personal development, both in Oregon and in here, than he had in South Central. Good for him, okay? He's got a chance to stretch himself. And now he probably would have gotten those opportunities eventually, but it was taking longer, okay? Because it's more workers, okay? All right. So he gets to develop, right? Serve you all, do wonderfully. But suppose he says, okay, I'm getting older, I need that retirement, okay? Okay. That's after he leaves you all. Long after he leaves you. He's gone. All right? And he says, or we say, okay, boy, you've done great. You've done great. We need you back here. Okay? See the tough thing for the leaders out here in terms of getting people from the East Coast is I may need to come back, first of all, for retirement. The other thing is your family. When I got a call here about 30 years ago. And one of the hard things was leaving my family. And everything I knew to start. And even if you want to do that, you got to sell that to your wife. You got to sell that to your kids, okay? It would be a lot easier if I could have said to my daughter, who thought leaving her friends and coming out here was a sentence, a death sentence. If I could have said to her 30 years ago, okay, we'll go, but we're coming back. Who knows, okay? So that's what we propose. Now, I haven't gone anywhere, and I'm getting ready to leave. But if I was still around, I'll propose it again, because I think it's a win-win for both of us, okay? It allows people to take advantage of the regional conference retirement plan while at the same time serving the wider church. As I said, we all in this together. We all trying to spread the gospel primarily to people of color, more of whom live out here, okay? So you all not doing well is not good for us either. I'm not saying you're not doing well, but I'm saying we need you to do well because we share a common purpose, all right? Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, forgot. That's what happens when you get old. See, remember I told you? You forget? Yes. See, it's good to have young people. See, she rescued me. All right, go ahead.
Just a quick question. What is Sister White's counsel during all that prejudice within the church?
Okay, keep in mind that Mrs. White died like 30 years before regional conferences. And keep in mind that in the time of Sister White, the vast majority of black people lived in the South. And there was no hope of integration then. Black people and white people worshiping together then was asking to get killed. Okay, so that's why some people have read some of the things that she suggested about black people working for black people as racist when it was realism. Okay, the reason why Edson White would operate on a boat to preach to black people was because if he did it on land, he would have got killed. Okay, the principles were there. Right. Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so that's the first reason. It allows people of color to control their own resources. Reason number two, which is actually the more important reason, regional conferences are the best way to reach people of color with the gospel of Jesus Christ. All right, and we've demonstrated that by the growth of regional conferences. All right, there's about 300,000 people in regional conferences with $250 million of tithe. If regional conferences were a division, a world division, like North America, it would be the fourth largest of the 14 divisions. In other words, regional conferences have more tithe than all but 3 world divisions, even though they're not a division. Okay, so that's how much regional conferences have grown. Here's reason number 3. Regional conferences give people of color a seat at the denominational decision-making table. When I was a conference president, I was a delegate to General Conference, okay? If there were no, that's because I was a president of a conference. All presidents of conferences are delegates, okay? If I wasn't a president, if there were no regional conferences, we would have to be in a room where we were outnumbered at Southern Union saying, hey, when you all select delegates, remember us. So select us. We don't have to say that automatically, okay? And by policy, 2 of the 21 people from the North American division on the GC nominating committee, 2 of them are people from regional conferences, all right? Because they treat regional conferences as a union, all right? Delegate representation is decided by institutions to a large degree. So if you don't have institutions, it's tough to get representation, all right? Okay? And that's important because nobody can speak for you better than you can speak for you. So, for example, when there were no black General Conference vice presidents, we met with the General Conference president multiple times over about a 7-year period, and we kept pounding that same, there's Mr. President, there's not representation. Now, to be fair to him, in a world church, it's impossible for everybody to be represented at the level they want to be represented. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has some level of representation, whether it's a church, a school, or a hospital, in 90% of the countries in the world. So that's like 240 countries. You can't have 240 General Conference vice presidents. So as the church has gotten more diverse, more people are saying, hey, remember us? And I understand that, okay? I'm glad that we were one of the first to the table. Okay, so it took us almost 10, but we finally, I guess it was like the story of the woman with the judge who got tired of hearing her. So he finally appointed, but we wouldn't have been able to do that without our own institutions. All right, so he appointed one who unfortunately only served a little while and died suddenly. So then we had to go back and say, we want him replaced. And he was replaced by somebody from a regional conference, Dr. Pierre Omalier, who came from Atlantic Union, but he originally came from Northeastern. All right. Yes, you had a question? Yes, ma'am. All right.
So going back to the retirement, since you guys don't have to put anything in if you're with regional conference, is that right?
Yes.
So say you're just a pastor. You went to Oakwood, you went to Andrews, and then you get assigned by the conference to a church. Does that mean you're with regional conference? You're coming out of there, or you're just?
If you are working for either a regional conference or a state conference.
Okay, so you are coming out of either or.
Yes.
Either way. Okay.
Yes.
So I know at least 3 pastors that started off with the conference.
With the regional conference.
With the regional conference. Were assigned to a church, and scandals, things, whatever happened. They're not in the conference. They don't pastor anymore through the conference. So for retirement, does their years of service do anything about that? Or is just, that's it?
As long as you work 5 years, then, so the pastors who left involuntarily, and let's say they're 30s and their 40s, when they get to retirement age, they will receive whatever 5, and it wouldn't be very much, because in order to get the maximum, you need to serve 30 years. So 5 years, you wouldn't get but you would get something. Okay. The Regional Conference Retirement Plan started in 2000. Before that, we were all part of the NAD, North American Division Retirement Plan, which unfortunately went under. Okay? So I don't want to hear anything about black people not being able to run anything, because we didn't run their program. They were $1 billion in the hole. All right? So this is what they did. They ended it, and they said, we will keep our commitment to people who are already retired. But if you're not already retired, you don't have anything, So I don't know if they said you didn't have anything, but you're on your own now. So what state conferences do is they in essence have a version of a 401k. Where you contribute some, they contribute up to maybe 3% of your income. The two of them, those two together are your retirement that you manage. Okay, and they give you some guidance, but the difference is you are more. If the stock market goes down, then you are more affected with one account than you are with an account that has literally hundreds of millions of dollars in it, okay? So let's say, I'll make up a number. Let's say the regional conferences have their account has $500 million in it, right? And so you lose 10% of that because the stock market acts crazy. There's still $450 million left. As opposed to you having an account and you lose 10% of your account, whether it's 100,000 or 200, that's a much bigger hit for you than it is for the collective group. Unless 1929 happens all over again, no matter what happens to the stock market, it's not going to affect me personally on January 1 when I retire, because the account is too big. Okay. Yes.
So I have two questions. The first is, I've been hearing personally about the removal of the, you did a great job of explaining why we should keep them, regional conferences, but I've been hearing more and more about the removal of regional conferences, especially out here. And the second piece of that is because we're becoming much more multicultural and diverse. For example, my brother-in-law is a pastor at a multicultural church, and he's within a South Asian conference. He's actually in an Asian conference. So there's been more and more talk about disbanding regional conferences because we're becoming more of a melting pot, at least out here. Is that a push that's happening nationwide, or is that just something here locally that, and that's why I'm here?
It's a good question that I will answer in my last section.
Okay.
Okay, if you can hang on. Okay, and if I don't answer it, then come back. Okay, reason number 4. Now keep in mind here. This is okay. Here's another answer to why regional conferences aren't going to go away. Okay, number 1, they allow people of color to keep their own resources. No matter how multicultural you are, money is not multicultural. It's only one color. It's green. All right. And you either get to keep your green or you depend on somebody giving you green, okay? And so I would argue that if I were out here, I might say regional conferences might work better for us if for no other reason allows us to keep our own resources, okay? Regional conferences are also a better economic model. We just demonstrated that, where all those conferences, it costs way more money to run all those conferences than it costs to run the one regional conference. Well, it depends on who you're talking to, because I can only speak to the way South Central is set up, okay? The way South Central is set up is if the whole church wants to disband South Central, it doesn't matter, because constitutionally, the only people that can dismantle South Central are the people of South Central, okay? I suspect most conference constitutions, at least regional conference constitutions, are written that way. Okay, so the people in regional conferences aren't saying that. Maybe other people are saying, why don't we all come together? You know, and if the narrative, which I'm gonna talk about in the last section, is why don't we all come together? That's a wonderful idea, except, no, it's not even the money. Think about it for a minute. How integrated are really our churches? I understand that churches that started out Caucasian are multicultural. That's true, okay? But black churches are still black, okay? And well, I'm gonna get ahead of myself, because I want to answer your question. We have, here's the ugly truth. We have no history of the majority culture staying in an entity that's no longer overwhelmingly Caucasian. We have no history of that. The history is once an entity is no longer overwhelmingly Caucasians, the Caucasians leave. So we do have a form of integration, but it's one way, okay? It's black people leaving majority black institutions, churches, whatever, to go to white institutions. The good news is, once upon a time, you couldn't do that. Everybody my age has a story of going to, or they know it happened to somebody, of going to a white church back in the day and white people either not letting you in at all or saying you would be more comfortable in the church across town. Everybody my age has that story, okay? Because that's what we used to do. They don't do that anymore, and that's good. That's a good thing. But what does happen, that doesn't happen. What does happen is once the minority population reaches a certain level, then the majority leaves. We have, and the most glaring example of that, and I got to wrap up because pretty soon I'll be the only one here talking, okay? The most glaring example of that is Greater New York Conference. Greater New York Conference is a majority Caucasian conference at one time that has turned completely black and Latino. Completely, okay? So the question, and Greater New York is New York City. So we're not talking about rural Alabama or not even rural California. We're talking about New York, which is the largest city in the country by far. All right, so the question is, hang with me, I'm almost done. The question is, where did all our Caucasian brethren go? There's only one of three answers. Number one, they all died. Every last one of them, they died. That's not true. Number two, they disappeared in the Hudson River. They're like Atlantis. They're living below the sea, okay? That's not true. There's only one explanation left, and that is faced with a choice between going to a church that's no longer overwhelmingly Caucasian and not going at all. They stopped going. And that would be, that's more explainable in the Bronx, which is a lot more black, okay? I could see the church turning black there. That's all, because I've preached in Greater New York. I preached in the Bronx, but I also preached in Long Island, okay? Now that's not black, okay? But the church is, okay? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, no matter, when people say let's all come together, sounds good. You can't integrate with people who leave when you get there. So, regional conferences are not just good for black people, they're also good for our Caucasian brethren. Because without regional conferences, black people would be in their conferences, which means they would be gone. Because unfortunately, I hope those of you who are still here can stomach that without getting mad. And now, to be fair to our Caucasian brethren, it's not all race. Some of it's culture. Black people and white people worship very differently, generally speaking, in the Adventist church. Now, that's not true everywhere. If you go where I live in the South, white Baptist preachers preach like black preachers, okay? But in the Adventist church, black people and white people, generally speaking, worship very differently. And there's nothing wrong with saying we are more comfortable with our culture's worship. There's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong is when we say we are more comfortable and none of y'all can come unless you look like us. Now that's wrong, okay? Okay? I, as an old line traditional Adventist, I have culture shock sometimes in black churches. I was in a church recently where the music was so loud, my wife literally had to yell in my ear to talk to me. I'm shocked by that. If you sing the same chorus 36 times, I have an issue with that, okay? You know, I was in a black church recently. I said, what in the world is going on here, okay? So some of it's cultural. A lot of it's race, but it's not all race. Some of it is, some of it, I'm more comfortable. And if, can I be honest, before I wrap up? I've had the privilege of preaching in both white churches, primarily white churches, and primarily black churches. Can I tell the truth? I preach differently. I do. I respect the culture. Now, do I preach, if today all of you all were Caucasian, would I have preached exactly the same way? No. I would have taken a little off. I would have taken a little off because I respect the culture. Okay? Now I wouldn't go all the way off. You know, probably 75%, you know. So some of it's culture. Okay? And as the church becomes more multicultural, that's a good thing. But managing a multicultural group is harder than a group of one set of people. And that's like the discussion we're having at General Conference, where every major group wants representation on the upper levels of the church. That's a lot easier, that's a lot harder to manage than when the assumption was, ain't nobody getting up here unless you're white, okay? Now that's the way it used to be, okay? Now there were a few exceptions for black people, but it was nobody but Caucasian on the upper levels of the church. It was overwhelmingly white and male, okay? And that's the other adjustment that the church has had to make. There's a female vice president. That was unheard of once upon a time. So now you got seven vice presidents, and you got to divide them up with a church that has 200 different countries. Okay? When I was a little boy, the only and not only you have to divide them up among all those, but now you got to put in a female. And you should. You should. Okay? So, but when I was a little boy, it was, how many white people are we going to elect? And then we'll throw in a few black people at the end. That was the end. There were no Latinos. There were no Asians. I'm talking about in leadership. There were no Asians. There were no women. There were very few black people. So now the discussion is, how do we divide up the pie? How many, or to change metaphors, how many different chairs do we have to put at the table? Okay? And it's a good discussion. But the hard part of the discussion is that means that it's easy for those of us who are male, we have to move aside to a degree to make room for our sisters. You know? And we should, but it's harder to do than to say. Okay? You know, when you want to talk, I'm gonna finish. The people who have privilege have to admit they have privilege. As a male in the Adventist church, I have privilege. My career is way different as Mr. Dana Edmond than it would have been as Miss Dana Edmond. I would not be standing here today if I were a female. Because I wouldn't have had the experience at the different levels that you need to have to get here. Okay? So now what we have to do, we have to say, and this is a hard discussion, not only to have for men, but also to have with women, to say, listen, you don't have the experience, okay? But we're going to give you this responsibility anyway, because to say you got to wait, there's no woman in this church with 47 years of experience. None, okay? Because we weren't hiring women. Okay, so now we have to figure out, okay, how do we make room at the table on the upper levels of the church for people who don't have that experience? Because we need to do it. We are better with more diversity, but there's some challenges that come with that. And the first challenge is the people with the privilege have to admit it. They got to admit it, and that's hard to do. All right. Okay. I got to finish. Okay, real quickly, regional conferences are one of the great, why do we need them? It's one of the great success stories in our church. Why you want to get rid of something that's growing 4 times faster? Okay. Reason number 6, black churches are often the only Seventh-day Adventist churches in the city. That's where the people are. Our Caucasian brethren tend to be in the suburbs. Okay, black churches tend to be in the cities. That's where the people are. Okay, number 7, black church entities address social issues in ways that the majority culture cannot. I'll ask the men, how many of you have been stopped by the police for no reason other than your skin color? How many of you have been stopped? Well, no, okay, you've been stopped too. Okay, how many people, period, have been stopped? Okay, all right, okay. Okay, so if this were a primarily Caucasian church, I think the response would be different. If you have a son, have you ever given him what I call the talk that says, if you get pulled over, we've all given them the talk. I suspect not very many of our Caucasian colleagues have had to do that. And so we address those issues in a way that our Caucasian brethren cannot. Okay? All right. And then last, reason number 8, racism is not dead. It's just not. I mean, we've been dealing with it to a greater or lesser extent for 400 years. It's not going to go away. All right. So in a perfect world, would we have regional conferences? No. But we don't have a perfect world. Okay? So then what's the best thing for mission? Okay? In the eastern side of the country, we've taken the position the best thing for mission is regional conferences. Now, the next group of people, and this is a hard thing for the church to swallow. The next group of people who may make that decision are Latino brothers. Because they have the members, they don't have the structure. And structure makes all the difference in the world, okay? People don't like the structure, but there's no church besides the Catholic Church that would change their structure for ours, okay? Because nobody has the worldwide structure of hospitals, schools, and churches that Adventists have besides the Catholic. Nobody has that. And the reason why we have that is the one thing that we do that young people hate, and that is we share tithe. That more money in this church leaves this church than stays in this church, okay? Everybody hates that, okay? But the problem is you are looking at what goes out instead of what's not coming in. Everybody got quiet. Everybody got quiet. See, tithe is the easy target, okay? Y'all's real problem, if you have the money problem, it's not the tithe, it's what you're not getting in offering. That's your problem, Okay? And so you want to pick off the tithe instead of fixing the problem with the offering. I've looked at way too many, whatever the treasurer's report, and I've looked at way too many tithe and sorry offering. Way too. That's y'all's problem. You know, I just got through reading on Facebook. Oh, the church has $100 million. Why? And the General Conference has $100 million, and we struggling with schools. Okay, each level of the church is responsible for a different level of education. The General Conference, that's not their job. They don't call it GC school. They call it church school. It's the church's responsibility. Nobody wants to hear that. Okay? Now, the conference shares that responsibility by paying a portion of the teacher's salary and all the benefits. Okay, so the church, the local school is the operating side, that's y'all. It's not the conference, it's not the general, that's y'all. And if y'all decide to fund it, then you don't have a problem. Okay? Everybody got quiet. Right. Well, look at, okay, let me go to you. Oh, did you have your hand up? Okay, you're okay. All right, I'm going to go to you now. I'm going to go back to Sister Butler.
So with that said, that is an interesting point. I never went to Adventist school, though I was a pastor's kid. Finances. Okay. I went to Oakwood for 1 year.
Okay.
Finances. My daughter, she'd even consider Oakwood. Finances. So my question is, you mentioned that we're having less. I have one child, so we're having less. I'm one of 4 growing up, but one child. And there's only 3 between me and my 4 siblings, children. So I'm exactly what you're speaking of. So with that said, is there any type of initiatives? Is anyone thinking about those things as you're leaving to try to figure out how do we encourage that or correct that, or how do we bridge that gap?
Okay, the first thing we're going to have to do, and we're running out of time to do it. The first thing we have to do is we have to educate the younger generation as to how the church works. Because this is the bottom line. This is the bottom line. The gospel commission, to go into all the world, preach the gospel, that didn't come from Ted Wilson or the new General Conference president. It didn't even come from your pastor. That came from God. No matter how much money you have in this church, you can't take the gospel to the world. Taking the gospel to the world requires a world organization. That requires faithfulness from you, okay? The whole church is funded by the local church member funding the places that are supposed to be funded. Not just your church. You got a responsibility to fund the world church. Because if everybody in, is it Pacoima? Is it Pacoima? If every single person in Pacoima became Adventist, it still doesn't get us out of here. It just means your church is too small. That's it. And you've done a wonderful job, okay? Okay, so we got to quit thinking about what's best for me, my local situation, and doing what the Lord said, and that is taking the gospel to the world. And that requires a willingness to sacrifice. Now, it's easier to sacrifice if you actually understand what your role is. And we have assumed that you're going to do the same thing that your mother did, and that's just write the check. No, they're not going to do that. You got to explain to them. This is how the church works. So let me give you an example before I go to Ms. Butler. Different churches on education, because that's everybody's concern when you have kids. You know, why can't my child go? So they go to General Conference and see the General Conference has $100 million in reserves. How come what they doing with those money? Okay. So there's like a zillion schools in the world. If the General Conference emptied out every dollar, that might last a year. Then what? They have reserves for emergencies. Okay? I just dealt with a major entity that had an emergency. The only way that entity survived was entities had reserves. Okay? It's like your savings. That's what they have reserves for. Okay? So the local school is funded by primarily the local church and the conference. Academies are funded by the conference. Unions fund universities and colleges. And the division funds schools that serve the division, and the general, like Oakwood, the division helps fund Oakwood because it serves the whole division. And the General Conference funds entities that serve the World Church, Loma Linda, Andrews, okay? So each level has a responsibility, okay? And they need to, and so they have no reason to look at somebody, at another entity to do their job. All right? Sister Brother, are you handing your mic away?
Yeah, because I done forgot what I was
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you bad as me. I'm so sorry.
What I wanted to say is that I think that all that you're saying is correct. And I'll say two issues. One is, you mentioned it when you were talking, assumption. We assume that the local congregation understands the operation of a worldwide church. I would say 98% of the people don't.
You're right.
I work for the union, but everybody tells me I work for the conference. That in itself says that people don't understand the hierarchy of the church. Secondly, some of the systems are outdated. They've never been looked at and do a reset. For example, subsidies. We're the only African American church in San Fernando Valley. We have a school that our students had problems at that school, and the majority of our students don't go to that school. They go all the way over to another school. I don't know if the problems are any different over there because, but they go to a different school, and our subsidy goes to this school where we have no African-American children. Now we have an African-American school in our conference that we can't contribute to. We want to see African-American children, have a Christian education, and that school has lost its high school because all the churches don't return their subsidies. Most of the churches in Southern California have relinquished subsidy, but we won't come up with a different plan. We're like the insanity. You keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. We won't come up with a different plan to make the school system healthier, able to thrive. It's not that we don't want to pay subsidy, give subsidy, but we're throwing money towards, and we can't help the kids that we need to help because you know what I'm saying?
I do, and honestly, and this is not a pitch for regional conferences, but that is one of the challenges with not having a regional conference. And I don't have an answer, and if I did, I wouldn't presume to tell you all out here how to do your work. But it's a serious problem. It is a serious problem. I do think that there's probably a way to fix it, but it's a serious problem. But to get back to I'm sorry, you were about to say something?
add one more thing. When I came here from Allegheny East.
Okay. Didn't know that.
And I never even knew there was such a thing as an Anglo church. when I came out here and saw all the diverse, all the different cultural group churches. I was too new in the church to know it. But so I came out here advocating regional conference. After being in the church about 15 years, I was advocating regional conferences. But over the years, I appreciate the fact of the structure that we have in Pacific Union because of racism. I appreciate the fact that we have been able to, what we weren't able to get on the East Coast in terms of leadership in the upper, in the conferences, in the union. I appreciate the fact that this union has been able to accomplish that.
Okay.
So there's both sides
Sure.
of
And
that
let me be
story.
clear, and I said this at the beginning, let me say it again. I'm not trying to tell you that's what you need to do here. I'm only explaining how we got what we got and why we want to keep it. And there are certainly, it's not like no one ever leaves a regional conference and comes out here. That's not true, okay? And they will tell you of the advantages of the system that you have here. There are some. And I will tell you, even in my case, came very close to leaving a regional conference and coming out here. Came very close. All right. Okay. All right. Now, I got to do this in like 5 minutes. Okay, here we go. Now, here are the things that people believe that aren't true. And there are 3 of them I want to talk about. One is regional conferences are a relic of segregation. That's blaming the victim, okay? And then also, if regional conferences are a relic, then that would make state conferences a relic of segregation too, all right? I dealt with this earlier. If regional conferences went away, that we'd all come together, okay? Again, I've had the privilege of preaching in a bunch of churches out here. Most of them that are largely black churches are largely black churches. Okay, the diversity occurs in churches that once were all white and just have become less white. Okay, we do the honest truth is, we do not have a lot of success with maintaining long-term diversity that does not allow for the majority culture to remain the overwhelming majority culture. That's true in neighborhoods, it's true in churches, it's true out here, it's true back east. We have not been able to keep in the Adventist church, there's no such thing as a church that's 50% black and 50% white. It just doesn't happen. Okay. All right. Myth number 3 is integration in the United States is not a one-way street. We talked about that. Okay. Black people seek diversity, but diversity does not seek us. Okay, last here's what I remind people. That's a sink. The reason why I show you a sink is Allegheny, which is where Sister Butler came from. When y'all started out, the conference office was a rented room in the bookstore of one of their members. The president's desk was a sink with a board over it. That's all they had. Okay? That's Allegheny East today. We celebrate what the Lord has done. Okay? You all ever read in the Bible all those ites, the Jebusites and the Hittites and the Hivites and all them heights? They don't exist. You know who should be a part of that group? The Negroites. You think about it for a minute. Last year I preached in South Africa, a place called Durban. Took me 33 hours to get there. Wore me out. That's not how our ancestors came over. I went over there on a plane. They came over on a boat in horrific conditions. Should have wiped all of them out. God saved them, preserved them. We celebrate that and how the Lord has preserved them and us. We celebrate regional conferences. Now, there are other systems that work. Good for you. Okay? Praise the Lord. And one of the reasons why we have Elder Childs on our board is because we recognize we all in this together. Okay? But what has worked for us are regional conferences. Right? And later than I planned, the end. All right? Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. And come, yes, Sister Butler. See, I was getting, now you can't blame me.
No, you're finished. I wanted to personally.
Wait, hold on. I don't want y'all calling me like one of my friends. They called him Pharaoh because he wouldn't let the people go.
I just wanted to say that working in the union office for 25 years, I was there when Elder Edmond took on the role of executive director at the regional conference office. And North Pacific Union, we had a lot of issues in terms of working with the regional conferences. And I know for a fact that Elder Edmond helped to smooth out those rough patches and make those crooked paths straight in terms of the Pacific Union Conference and North Pacific Union Conference, black ministry departments getting a better seat at the table, so to speak, because the two conferences out here, the two unions out here, we were kind of like stepchildren. I'm probably telling you more than you need to know, but we were kind of like stepchildren because we weren't regional conference. And Elder Edmond, I can honestly say, has done a lot of work to clear those things up and get the voting rights and those kind of things that we did not have before he took over the administration of the regional conferences. And I don't know if I wouldn't necessarily have this opportunity to thank you, but because I've been through the whole process, I personally thank you. And all the times you come out to our programs and engage with us, it has done a lot to bridge the gap between the non-regional unions and the regional conference. Thank you.
You're very kind. Thank you. And here's how I close as Dr. Shields is coming up. And it's something I hope we remember. The only loser in a fight with us and us is us. And we fought each other too long. And we're the losers. So I'm very glad, and it's been a privilege to work with my classmate, Elder Childs, Elder Doolin, when he was there, and now Elder Lewis. It's been a privilege, so thank you. And I appreciate you looking out for me every time I came. So.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Edmond, for coming, and we appreciate that information, and I believe that we are all a little bit better with understanding our structure as a church. So can we give Elder Edmond a hearty amen for coming all the way from Huntsville, coming all the way here for us. So let's have a word of prayer, and let's have any other questions. Everybody wants to go home, boy, I tell you. Well, my wife isn't here, so I ain't got nowhere else to go. So I can hang out with y'all all day long. All right, let's pray. Father, I thank you for this moment, that you've been so gracious to us that you have allowed us to be a part of your plan for humanity. Bless my friends here today, Lord, as they travel back home with no accidents, tickets, or trouble, and bring us all back here safely for our next meeting. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. We do have a board meeting in the morning at 10. Well, we got a board meeting in the morning at 10:30. 10:30? 10:30? No? Oh, well, it was canceled then. I guess. Sister Saley, it's canceled. So we don't have to worry about it. I don't think everybody knew that it was back on. So, yeah. So we do have a business session coming up again next week, right? So we can just do everything at the business session, right? Okay, great. One of the things I will say that over here we do have an allowance. And so although our church is very faithful in tithe and offering, because we do have the structure that we have here, we are able to ask the conference for allowance to give us stuff for evangelism and other things of that nature there. So God is blessing us here. We got a lot of things happening here, but none of it happens without you. You are the central piece of what God wants to use. And so keep the faith. And if you see someone that's a little down, pat them on the back. Tell them that it's okay. God is still on the throne. Still on the throne. We've got to keep each other encouraged as we move forward in faith. I've already prayed, but you guys are welcome to leave anytime you get ready. It's like I said, I have nowhere else to go. We can keep talking. So, Latoya, we're done for tomorrow, right? We're off?